Setting and meeting ESG goals is an essential part of a successful long-term business strategy. To achieve this requires the ability to accurately quantify your goals and measure your progress towards them. This is important to provide accurate information for your investors, your employees, and to enable reliable documentation of having reached your goals. For many aspects of ESG and sustainability, this is a complex process. To illustrate this point, we will discuss examples relating to two areas of sustainability: greenhouse gas emissions and water.
Many companies have voluntarily undertaken assessment of their greenhouse gas emissions and provided public disclosure of this information. Most of these companies have then gone on to set targets for the reduction of these emissions. Scope 1, emissions directly emitted by an organisation, and Scope 2, those arising primarily from the generation of purchased electricity, are relatively straightforward to measure using established methodology such as that provided by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. However, Scope 3 emissions, those from upstream and downstream sources, such as the emissions associated with the production and logistics of purchased products and services, or the use and disposal of products sold by a company, are much more difficult to quantify, leading many firms to estimate these on a spend basis and to set engagement rather than quantitative reduction targets. This may now change following the recent SEC enhancement and standardization of climate-related disclosures for investors, which requires Scope 3 GHG emissions and intensity, if material, or if the registrant has set a GHG emissions reduction target or goal that includes its Scope 3 emissions. The question of what is material in this case seems to have some flexibility, but importantly, there is wording which indicates that an explanation of why a Scope 3 source of emissions is or is not material would be useful to include in disclosure, and this would seem to require an assessment of these emissions in order to reach this determination. The disclosure of Scope 3 emissions is included to allow investors to assess the impact of achieving Scope 3 targets, and therefore these emissions will need to be broken down and assessed much more accurately than a simple estimation of emissions based on spend.
The energy transition will require increased production of key minerals, lithium and cobalt for batteries, copper for EVs and the grid, and rare earths for the magnets used in wind turbines. The mining and processing of minerals, however, often requires a substantial amount of water, and mines can be located in arid areas of the world. Several mining companies have set targets to reduce water use and water discharge, and are working toward mining that has no discharge of water. Quantification of this effort often focuses on being water positive, that is, putting more water back into the water system than is initially removed from that system for operational purposes. By tracking water use throughout the company's operations, the company can target a net positive water balance. We can see how the net zero concept in air emissions can be reconfigured for other resources, and in all cases, companies and stakeholders will want to be able to measure the steps along the way to achieving their ESG goals.